This is Rick Rule for Rule Investment Media and the Rule Classroom, sponsors of the 2025 Rule Natural Resources Investment Symposium in Boca Raton, Florida, or via live stream wherever you happen to be. Whether or not you attend live or live stream, a few things that you need to know. The first is that we are going to be presenting between 50 and 55 hours of valuable, dense programming, more than you can absorb in the 4 days that you have to absorb it. To that end, we have recorded all of the proceedings, and you will have access to all of those proceedings for a year after the conference, which you will need. Further, even with that, we're going to give you more material than you can absorb. And so we are interviewing all of the sponsors and all of the speakers before the conference so that you can reach out to the sponsors even before the conference, but at the very least, allocate your time at the conference more efficiently. Note too that every public company exhibitor at the conference has been vetted specifically. If the conference sponsors don't own an exhibitor in their own portfolios, the exhibitors are not allowed on the floor. In fact, we refuse more exhibitors than we accept. So let's get on with the program. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Keith Henderson, Latin Metals. Note, I am a Latin Metals shareholder. Keith, first of all, thank you for years of toil on behalf of mineral exploration speculators. Thank you, too, for your ongoing sponsorship and support of the Natural Resources Investment Symposium.
Pleasure.
Tell me something about your background, Keith. How did you come to be running Latin Metals? What did you do that makes you qualified to answer all the nosy questions I'm about to ask?
Good question. Uh, I'm a geologist by training. I was born in Belfast in Northern Ireland, but I've really worked all over the world. I've got about 30 years experience, so I'm getting a little older, but I would divide that 30 years into two 15-year periods, basically, almost exactly. So the first 15 years of my life, I was a geologist, just working in the field. I worked in more than 20 countries. I worked like Europe, Africa, North America, South America, a little bit of Australia even. Uh, at last count, I've been involved with or seen about 150 different projects and a lot of exposure to a lot of different commodities. So, gold, silver, copper, zinc, other base metals, met coal, iron ore. I've done a lot of things. And that was basically the first 15 years. And after that, the second 15 years is kind of completely different. I started founding companies. I'm a founder, I'm a CEO, I'm a director, and trying to create that value for shareholders. And I guess success is a funny thing. I am a geologist, so I sort of let me apologize to all the other geologists, but geologists have a different view of success to investors. I think it's like, we acquire the right project, we make a discovery, we have a resource estimate, we get it to a bankable feasibility study. Those are all successes, but if nobody's making any money, and if the investors aren't making any money, what is the point? I can point to a couple of successes that I've had in my career. The first one was a little over 10 years ago. We had an iron ore deposit in Peru called Pampa de Pongo. It was an interesting one because we acquired it for about $350,000 from Rio Tinto. And I think we only drilled about 5 holes, and we ended up with this PEA with 850 million ton inferred resource at like 43% iron. And that ended up getting sold to a private company for $100 million US. So that was a great success. More recently with Velocity Minerals in Bulgaria, we have announced the sale of all of the company's assets in Bulgaria. The total value on that's about $59 million US. And at the time that deal was announced, that was a little over like 2 times market cap. So again, kind of a decent kind of exit opportunity for people. So I view those kind of successes as the kind of successes that we're all really looking for, the ones that create an opportunity for shareholders, whether it's an opportunity that's just liquidity and the price going up and a chance to sell at your leisure, or whether it's a more kind of defined M&A type exit where the company's sold.
So, Keith, 30 years really in the exploration business, all continents, almost all commodities. How did you decide to do Latin America? And what particular commodities or geologic horizons are you specializing?
So in 2019, when we put Latin metals together, it was really, of all the places I'd worked, I felt like Latin America had the most opportunities in terms of unexplored terrain. But I don't work just anywhere in South America. We're in Peru and Argentina, and that's by design. It's because I've got experience there. It's because I know people there and I know the geological terrains. And I'm not working in Brazil, which is nothing against Brazil, but I've never worked there. I don't know anybody. I don't want to do business there because I don't know how to. So I stick to what I know. Argentina is hugely underexplored. Like if you look at what we know to have happened in Chile over the last 30 or 40 years, and to some extent also in Peru, Argentina's had nothing going on. And you see the discoveries like Filo del Sol in San Juan, and you just think, oh my God, how many more of these are there to be found? And the answer is a lot, like places, certain provinces like Mendoza have been shut down for 15 years and now they're opening up again. The the country's political environment, Argentina again, is just getting better and better. So I think these are the right places to be in South America. And, and I'm comfortable being there. And I think I can deliver great value with good projects.
You mentioned Filo de Sol, Vicuña, you mentioned Peru, you mentioned Argentina. Does that mean that what you're looking for is large copper gold porphyries? Are you also looking for distal epithermals? What is it that you're trying to accomplish on behalf of shareholders?
Yes and yes. So it's largely just a commodity focus. Like we decided to stick to precious metals and copper in that 2019 decision at the beginning, and we haven't really wavered from that. Like I am keen to try and see if I can make some uranium acquisitions here just to diversify a little bit, but it's fundamentally copper and gold. The project sizes have to be larger, else we can't attract the right kind of partners. We've got Anglo Gold Ashanti working with us on a project called Organuyo, which is now fully permitted and ready for drilling and will be drilled this year. What are they looking for? Well, like all big companies, they're looking for tier one discoveries. And for Anglo Gold, according to what they tell their shareholders, that's like 5 million ounces plus. It's a pretty big hurdle rate, but if they actually look at my project and they see that kind of potential, I'm pretty happy about it. And Anglo Gold have told me on more than one occasion that Organuyo is their number one exploration project in the world. And that makes me pretty excited to see what will come up from the drilling.
Well, that brings up your funding mechanism. You are described by those who know you as a prospect generator. Uh, for those people watching this tape who don't know what that means, a project generator is normally a company where the management team exercises their regional or geological sophistication to generate targets and then brings in often larger companies to earn an interest in the project so that the shareholders of the generator don't dilute themselves at the knowledge base, that is to say, at the company level, but rather at the project level. Is that consistent, Keith, with what you're trying to do in Latin metals?
100%, yeah. And I like to think that we're doing it pretty well. And I say that for a particular reason. It takes a long time to build a prospect generator. Like you've got to find the projects, you've got to get the early stage exploration done. You've got to come up with things that are going to be interesting enough for big companies. And that takes real time, right? So to get to the point where, like us, you've got potentially 3 drill programs coming up in 1 year, it takes years to get there. And I find a lot of companies that like the idea of turning into a prospect generator will kind of lose patience with themselves, or their shareholders lose patience. I don't know what it is, but a lot of the time, like if you're going to be a prospect generator, you really got to avoid the drill rig. That's where all the big dollars are. That's where all the highest risk is. You can't be drilling your own projects in general terms. And yet so often prospect generators get 2 or 3 years down the road and they just say, oh, you know what, we're going to drill one of our projects. And then they kind of blow up the whole structure. So I think it's really important to stick to the model. If people are investing in you as a prospect generator, you really must be a prospect generator and try and stay to that model.
Keith, in 40 years, well, more than 40 years of mineral exploration speculation, statistically, the highest probability of success that I've encountered of participating in an economic discovery has been the prospect generators. As you suggest, it's a process, it takes time. Uh, One of the things that I have come to really like about the prospect generator methodology, not merely the risk reduction, but the idea that I don't need to listen too much when Keith Henderson tells me how great his projects are. I just have to see that Anglo or somebody else likes them. I remember turning a project years ago to Newmont, walking through Newmont's office in Inglewood, and being delighted to see 200 earth scientists in that building who I didn't have to employ. The idea that the major mining companies like the project reduces the need for me as the investor to do my own technical due diligence, but it also means that a whole bunch of brains are employed on the project that I didn't have to pay. Can you tell me something about your current and past partners? In other words, who has validated your methodology and why?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics of conversation. I think this is huge for investors because they don't have either the technical knowledge or the data to make the decisions that they need to make. So it's hugely important. As I mentioned a moment ago, Anglo Gold are on one of the projects. We've got another company on a copper porphyry project. The company is called Mushiko Resources. They're not a very well known company, but they're a copper producing company and they're private. That's why they're not very well known. Uh, in the past, we've worked with Newmont, with Yamana. Like the list is the list, and it's bigger companies, and I think that's critical. Like what the bigger companies bring typically is really, really good technical knowledge, and in Anglo Gold's case, it's essentially the experience that they got in Colombia in the early 2000s, where they made discoveries. We won't talk about whether those discoveries made them any money or not, but they did make discoveries, and they feel like they've got some proprietary knowledge there, and they do. They've seen all of those rocks, and they know how they got to that discovery. So when they come to my project and they get on the ground and they see the same kinds of rocks, I don't need to worry about it either, Rick. Like it's just as the investors don't. Like I'm delighted that they like the project. I'm delighted that they're going to drill it, and I know what they're looking for, and that's just really exciting for me.
For me as an investor, it's impossible to overstate the importance of that. I know that I could hire a consultant to look at your project. He or she would charge me five, six, $7,000. And in tailoring a report to me, they would try to tailor it to my bias so that I selected them and paid them five or six or $7,000 again. The difference is that when Anglo goes and looks at it, as opposed to charging me, they pay me. And I think the most honest assessment of whether they like something or not is whether they are prepared to spend millions of dollars to back up their thesis. So tell me a little bit about what you think that Anglo is seeing on this project.
They're looking for a high sulfidation gold system. Their technical analogy is Salares Norte in Chile, which is 3.75 grams per ton. Sorry, 4.7 grams, 5 grams per ton, and about 4 million ounces. And that's exactly what they're looking for. And those are the kinds of rocks that they're seeing on the ground. Whether there's a deposit there is yet to be seen, but that's the technical analogy, and that's what they're looking for.
So, Keith, the great American securities analyst, Janet Jackson, sister of Michael Jackson, famously said, "What have you done for me lately?" So, you've generated these projects that have attracted Anglo. Where are you going next? How are you going to grow the company? You're only as good as your next project. What's your next project look?
Well, the nice thing about the prospect generator model is that there's essentially no limit to how many projects you can have because you only have to cover your G&A and a little bit of exploration to get to the acquisitions, and you don't have to cover anything else. So the growth potential is actually limitless, and that's kind of what I constantly think about. I've got a couple of partners in the bag right now. I've got more partners that I hope to bring online this year, both in Argentina and in Peru. And as those projects go out the door, I'm just feeding that pipeline. And so investors can expect to see me staking more ground, coming up with new acquisitions and adding more projects. And that just keeps on going. It continues to be non-dilutive. Like we're raising about $1.3 million a year on average. And that covers our total burn, which is essentially $2 million, just to use round numbers. And that covers Vancouver, Lima, Argentina office, all of the exploration, all of the acquisitions. It's just a low-cost operation. But more interestingly, it has the potential to become self-sustaining. Like the 1.3 we raised this year, contrasting to the $19 million that I expect to be spent by partners, But when I look forward to future years with more partners, and also as these option agreements get towards the latter stages, the money coming in, the non-dilutive cash coming in, gets bigger and bigger. So, for example, Anglo Gold, if they make their next payment in 2026, it's 850,000 US dollars. If they make the following year, it's $1 million US dollars. I'm also finding that the amount of money that companies are spending on projects now is going up. Like, there's more and more companies coming to me looking for projects. So I see that kind of change in the business. And what they're willing to spend to earn their interest is also going up. And the Michiko deal, they're paying me, let's say, 2.5 million US dollars over the course. They're paying a little over 4 million to the underlying vendor of the project. They're going to drill 65,000 meters to get to their initial 75%. And within that process, they have to produce a whole range of reports, including a bankable feasibility study. These are huge amounts of work. Like, you're looking at 70, $80 million worth of work if they get to the end of the project.
Keith, thank you for decades of effort on behalf of investors, lately on behalf of myself, among others. Thank you, too, for your sponsorship and support of the Natural Resources Investment Symposium. To the extent that our listener base or our attendees would like to learn more about Latin metals, who in particular do they contact and how do they reach this person?
The best thing that people can do is get in touch with our VP Investor Relations, who's a lady called Alicia Patterson, and they can reach her by telephone 778 683 4324. That's 778 683 4324. And it's Alicia Patterson.
Well, Keith, one more time, thank you for subjecting yourself to this process. I look forward to hosting you in Boca Raton.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to being there. Cheers.